Hello, welcome to Chapter 3 Podcast, the show for readers of science fiction, fantasy, and romance. This is Season 1, Episode 5. I'm Bethany, your host, and joining me as a guest is Mara from the YouTube channel Books Like Whoa. In today's episode, we will be talking about discovering your taste in science fiction and our feelings on various subgenres and tropes. If you want to support the podcast and get early access to episodes and exciting bonus content from all of our guests, check out our Patreon linked in the show notes. Before our conversation today, it's time for On My Radar, where I share 10 recent or upcoming book releases in science fiction, fantasy, and romance. I will give you my top 9, and my guest will have the opportunity to share one of hers. The books for today's episode will be released between November 24th and December 8th, 2020, with the exception of my guest recommendation. She's free to suggest any upcoming release. So we'll start with romance. First up on November 24th from Kensington is Notorious by Minerva Spencer. This is the start of a new historical romance series about youth of the Regency era subverting the social expectations of the day. This book includes a marriage of necessity between a wallflower and a rake, both with a distaste for convention. Then on December 1st, we've got 3 books releasing. First up from Harlequin, we have Stolen to Wear His Crown by Marcella Bell. Part of the Harlequin Presents line, this follows a scientist who must suddenly and secretly marry a king she has never met before. Then from Sourcebooks Fire, we're getting The Frozen Prince by Maxim M. Martineau, book 2 in the Beast Charmer series. This one's a fantasy romance involving assassins, dark magic, and a curse. Finally, from Avon, we have one of my most anticipated releases of the year, How to Catch a Queen by Alyssa Cole. This is the first book in the Runaway Royals series, a spinoff from The Reluctant Royals, which was a fantastic series. And this book features side characters from previous books and involves a royal arranged marriage gone wrong. Moving on, let's talk about some speculative releases. First, on November 24th from Ballantine, we're getting a sequel to Ready Player One. Do we need one? I don't know, but we are getting one regardless. So we have Ready Player 2 by Ernest Klein coming out as of today as you're listening to this episode. This follows the events of book 1 when Wade makes a technological discovery that will change everything. Then on November 30th, we have a novella from the author of Gideon the Ninth. Princess Floralinda and the 40 Flight Tower by Tamsen Muir is being released as a limited run from Subterranean Press, but you can also listen to it via audiobook. This one looks like a tongue-in-cheek fairy tale about a princess stuck in a tower so well constructed by a witch with monsters that all the princes have been unable to conquer even the first flight of stairs. Then on December 1st, we've got 2 books coming out. First up, we have another highly anticipated book coming from Penguin Teen. This is A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir. This is the final installment in her epic Middle East-inspired YA fantasy, and I am just waiting to see who she decides to kill off because I'm sure she's going to kill somebody off, if not multiple people. We'll see. Then from Entangled Teen, we are getting A Curse of Roses by Diana Pinguicha. This is a debut sapphic fantasy that is by a Portuguese author retelling a Portuguese legend. It follows a princess who is cursed to turn any food she touches into flowers while a famine is plaguing her land. Then finally, on December 8th, from Random House Children's, we have A Universe of Wishes, a We Need Diverse Books anthology edited by Danielle Clayton. Included are YA fantasy short stories by authors including V.E. Schwab, Rebecca Roanhorse, Natalie Sue Parker, and many more. So with that said, please join me in welcoming Mara to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it'll be good conversation tonight. If you could briefly introduce yourself to our listeners, that would be great, and share your pick for an exciting upcoming release.
Sure. My name is Mara. I am from the YouTube channel Books Like Whoa, and I would call myself an omnivore. I read pretty much all genres. Things I'm well known for are classics, romance, reading challenges, and just, I think, the sheer number of books I read. I'm a lot like Bethany. I read like 300 books a year. So I read it all, and I read a lot of it, including sci-fi and fantasy. Yep. And in terms of an upcoming release I'm interested in, there's so many, it's hard to choose. But I did this weekend just finish an arc of the next entry in the Wayward Children series. Ooh. And that is Across the Greengrass Fields by Shauna McGuire. That comes out on the 12th of January, 2021. And it's basically a fantasy if you were a horse girl growing up. It's so like there are unicorns and centaurs, and the magical world is called the Hooflands. So like that, I think, does it all.
Perfect.
And our main character is intersex, and we don't see that all the time. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's really good.
Shauna Maguire is always so on top of diverse representation in her books, but great stories too.
Yeah, and sometimes the pacing in these hasn't totally worked for me. Like it can feel a little off balance, but this was one that I felt like really moved along at a nice clip, and like it was just I thought it was a really good entry in the series.
Awesome. Yeah, that's up on my upcoming list of things to read in the next couple months, so that's good to know. Tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about science fiction, and part of this was prompted by Mara. I don't know if you want to share it all, but you this year did kind of a reading/video project on your YouTube channel, and guys, her YouTube channel will also be linked in the show notes, so if you want to follow her over there, you can. But a project trying out different sci-fi books, figuring out your taste in sci-fi, which I thought was a really interesting project. And I feel like there's a lot to talk about there in terms of what are the different subgenres of science fiction? How do you figure out what you like and don't like? How do you feel about specific tropes? And we can both kind of share about this. But yeah, I thought that was kind of a cool project.
Yeah, I called it Operation Sci-Fi because I have a series on my channel called Know Your Tropes, where I kind of talk about tropes and different genres and subgenres that I enjoy. And I think that that's honestly like one of the most empowering things you can have as a reader is language to describe what kind of books you like, because it makes it much easier for you to find books that you like. And when I came to do my sci-fi one, I realized that while I kind of am pretty good intuitively of picking out what I'm going to like, I didn't have a lot of sort of concrete language to describe that.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided I was going to read the 20 finalists from the Goodreads Sci-Fi Awards from 2019, which maybe we could even get to the whole, like, people have very strong feelings on the Goodreads Awards. But yes. I figured in terms of, like, measuring things that were popular, it would do a good job of that. So I didn't quite get through them all just because of some, like, personal life issues, but I got through most of them. And I definitely feel like coming out of that, because I was having to sort of be a little bit more analytical about it, I do think I have a much better kind of vocabulary to talk about what I do and don't like in that genre.
Yeah, no, I think it was interesting hearing you talk about it. And it's something I've been thinking about too, as I've been getting back into sci-fi in the last year. Because I used to read a lot of it and then had not read quite as much until more recently. But you know, there's so many different types of sci-fi and things that people like, and I realize people's tastes can be pretty dramatically different.
Yeah, I think you and I are similar in that we tend to be more kind of like character driven. I think my biggest takeaway, spoilers, is that what I like in sci-fi is actually pretty similar to what I like in fantasy. Like, I like things that are character driven. I want there to be a cool world or like cool setup, but I'm not necessarily into an epic where that's in like a ton of detail. I'm more focused on like the characters and the plot than like, a ton of really detailed world building. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty similar to what I like in fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think I'm similar in some ways, and I feel like maybe different in others, but generally I do like also things that are more character driven. Not necessarily, there are exceptions, but I like things that are more about characters and world building and political intrigue, or exploring ideas of empire but in space. I think that's really interesting. I'm less excited about books that are just like space battles. Like, I enjoy a good space battle, but I need it like there on purpose, mixed in with good characters or other things going on. I also think sometimes super hard sci-fi, depending on how it's done, can be less interesting if it's all about the science and the characters are completely flat and there's nothing else terribly interesting about it. So
yeah, I mean, and I think this just gets into like different strokes for different folks. I know that there are some people who just absolutely love, like, give me all the details of exactly how this science works in the case of sci-fi, or in the case of fantasy, like, give me every detail of this magic system. And that's just not, like, in I feel I feel like in fantasy, my one exception, like my one big exception, is that my favorite fantasy of all time is Lord of the Rings. And like that's really the only one I can think of where I'm like into it. Like, give me the description of this tree, give me the description of everything. Like, but for the most part, I want you to just like dazzle me. Like, just like make me I don't need a lot of explanation of how the spaceship works or
Mhm.
like I don't need a lot of details about the science behind it. I just need you to sell me that like I live in a world where this is how the science works.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I enjoy it when it's clear an author understands the science and weaves it in, as long as they're also good at writing other things. So I don't know if you've
Yeah, that's a
read.
good point.
Well, I know you've read at least her novella, but like Becky Chambers, I feel like is pretty good at that, where her I think her mom is a scientist. So it's clear that she understands a decent amount of the science behind what she's writing, but she's much more focused on characters and world building than on just the science.
Yeah, the one I read, I don't know that that's totally the vibe I got from it, but it was a novella, and I
Yeah.
do plan on reading Long Way to a Small Angry Planet sometime soon. The writing was beautiful. I wasn't that impressed with that novella, to be totally honest. I thought it was fine. But yeah, I want to try something that she's more known for.
As it is one of my favorite books of the year. It's okay.
Yeah, I
No, it's
know.
okay. I get it. No, I get it. I mean, I know we've
Yeah.
talked about this, but for those who are wondering, the book we're talking about is To Be Taught If Fortunate, which I get that it's not for everyone. I will say, because I also read Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, it's very different, and I do think you'll enjoy that one. It's much more like soft sci-fi with like a fun crew, and it's like I think you'll enjoy it. It's very
Yeah, like Jolly Japes with characters I like in
Mhm.
space. That sounds great. Like,
Yeah.
let's do that.
Yeah.
And again, the writing I thought was beautiful in that novella, but to me, that was really kind of the only standout part of it. So,
Mhm.
but again, different strokes for different
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think another thing that's kind of interesting is I can also be an ideas reader. So
Hmm.
sometimes if there's a book that I'm really into the ideas that the author is exploring, I will gloss over or overlook flaws in like pacing and plot and characters and stuff. I think like the classic example of this is probably Dune by Frank Herbert, which I love. And I hear
Oh
people
wow.
complain yeah. Because I hear people complain about it and say, you know, well, it's so slow and the plot is always getting interrupted with exposition and like the characters aren't like as dimensional as they and I'm like, well, you're not wrong. I just don't care because I was super into all the ideas he was exploring and the way he was doing it.
You're not wrong. This is so boring, but I just love the ideas. It's like,
It's not
whereas,
boring. Like I didn't find it boring. Like I see why people would. Like if they're not into,
yeah.
like I found it interesting and thought provoking.
Well, I mean, like, I think we share, I do enjoy, part of what I go to sci-fi and fantasy for is a
Mhm.
way of having an author explore metaphor and ideas and parallels to our own world in a magical or a like futuristic or whatever world. Like, I enjoy the metaphor to be a big part of what's happening, but I have to have it like it needs to be well incorporated into the story itself. So like Ring Shout, that is like one of my favorite books
Oh
of the year. It is so dense with ideas, but the pacing and the plot and the characters are all also excellent. So
yeah.
like it is very big on ideas, but it's in service of the story. Or like Murderbot. I think that's a huge part of why I love
Mhm.
Murderbot, because it has so much to say about like what it means to be human and like what consent means in terms of like who does and doesn't count as a human. But it's always in service of like this really fun, rompy space adventure. So I do like the ideas to be there, but like I will not give it a pass if if it's not well incorporated into the story. I'll say I love the idea behind this, but the execution
Mhm.
did not work for me.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, for anybody listening who has not yet read Murderbot, I feel like you should pitch it because you are now like the Murderbot stan.
I mean, if you don't know, I am the lead preacher at the Church of the Good News of Murderbot, and I would love for you to You know, pledge your troth to Murderbot. So, the Murderbot Diaries, I should say, is a series from Martha Wells. The first novella in it, really, is All Systems Red, and I would argue that All Systems Red is an example of a perfect novella because it is perfectly paced. It has perfect plot in terms of like what it's trying to do is executed super well. The characters are great. Like it is a textbook example of like just a perfect novella. And that novella is about our main character who refers to themselves as Murderbot because they are part human and part I'm never totally clear on like is it android or I don't know.
So I think they're a biological AI. So they're like artificial intelligence with biologically grown parts.
Yes. So their humanity is well in the context of the world is they are not considered to be like a full person or however you want to say that, but part the whole point of the series is that like yes they are a person, they have feelings, but anyway they're supposed to not just sort of be mindless drones, and they're one of many of these things called sec units, which basically are designed to be security units for different space explorations, but this particular unit has been able to hack its governor module in its brain, and so it now can think for itself, and it refers to itself as Murderbot because it thinks it's unlovable because it's killed people in the past as a part of its job. But like it's maybe the most cynical, lovable little sentient AI you've ever met.
Yeah.
And the first book is sort of like an isolated close circle mystery plot, which is part of why I love it. Like it's a kind of a mystery plot. There's lots of action. It's just the best. So go read All Systems Red.
Well, and like all Murderbot wants to do is like watch
TV.
Trashy TV and like
be left alone. Murderbot just wants to like find a like room in a spaceship and just like hang out there for eternity watching trashy TV.
Yes. But unfortunately, the world does not want to let Murderbot do that. So.
Yeah, well, the problem is Murderbot has a conscience, so when like the humans and other AIs in its orbit get into trouble, it can't help but help out.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Murderbot is a great character. It's a great series, and you should certainly read it if you haven't yet.
Yeah, absolutely. They just they're coming out with a box set of the first 3 novellas, I think. Or no, they did a box set. Oh no, they're coming out with a box set of the first 3 Wayward Children series. They have a box set of the novellas, the Murderbot novellas, I think.
Yeah. And Tor.com sometimes does them as free ebooks, so definitely
or highly discounted. Yeah, they're great. And the audiobooks are really good too. I like the audiobooks.
I've never tried the audio, but yeah, I could see that being a good audio pick.
Yeah, no, they're good on audio. Yeah, okay, so with this Operation Sci-Fi project, what are some things you discovered you do and don't like?
I've discovered that I'm very picky about a time travel trope. So, yeah, like, I can love it. Like, my favorite book from the whole project was The Light Brigade by Cameron Hurley. And it is military sci-fi that has a heavy time travel trope in it. So I can like it. I, however, for the most part, did not enjoy the books in that reading project, or I thought they were just okay, that had time travel. And I think what I've learned is that I like time travel if it is a plot device, but I think it's pretty like if a part of the project of the book is getting somewhat into the ethical or moral implications of time travel, I'm pretty picky about that. And I think I found that for the most part, I don't think people do that super well. Yeah. So that was probably one of my biggest findings. There was a lot of time travel on that list.
Yeah, I tend not to find that kind of thing is very interesting. Books that are about time travel in terms of what are the ethics or can you change the past or the future. I don't know why I don't find it interesting. I feel like maybe because I saw a lot of movies that were based around that when I was growing up and I just kind of never liked them much. I don't know.
Well, I think I find it kind of like emotionally manipulative. I think it's kind of a cheap or easy way to add some like emotional angst.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that there's like true moral, ethical, and emotional implications of time travel. Like
Hmm.
I think if you're willing to do the work, that can be addressed. But I think too often it feels sort of like almost like a tearjerker movie. Like it feels
Yeah.
melodramatic to me a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I didn't, and like in the Light Brigade, it's a part of the plot in the Light Brigade is, I just love the Light Brigade. It was great. But, you know, it's sort of the plot device. It's how the plot is moving along. But there's not all that much time spent, like, that's not where the sort of like main metaphor of the book is. It's much more
Mhm.
about sort of the ethics of war rather than the ethics of time travel.
So that's much more
So
interesting.
yeah, which I just felt like that was a more manageable project. But like
Yeah.
I read Here and Now and Then by Mike Chen, which was a time travel one. It wasn't my favorite, but I gave it 4 stars because I really did like, I thought he sufficiently, that was sort of the metaphorical heft of the book. And it
Mhm.
felt like he sufficiently addressed it in a way that did not feel emotionally manipulative to me.
Yeah. A book that I read recently that I thought was that I with time travel that I thought, well, I guess it's not actually, you know what? It's not even time. It's
JK.
not time travel, it's parallel universes, which I feel
Well, I think that's
similarly
a
about, to be
related,
honest.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think
It's
it's the same kind of like, I think it scratches a lot of the same itches.
yeah. It like that feels similar to me, but I one thing that I thought it was interesting, it definitely I didn't rate it super high because I think it's a debut novel and you can tell it's a debut novel, so like some things with the plot and pacing weren't ideal, but The Space Between Worlds by Michaia Johnson
Oh yeah, that
is
one looked interesting.
it is really interesting because it's using parallel universes and the way that they work in this world as a way of exploring um, issues of class structure and privilege. Because you can only travel to a parallel universe where your parallel self is no longer alive. And
Mm,
so there's a corporation that hires people to go, they like make money by finding stuff out about parallel universes. And so they'll hire people to go, but all of the people who can go are people from less privileged backgrounds because their parallel selves are less likely to be alive for various reasons,
mm.
which is interesting. So I think that's really interesting to me as a project. I don't know that it was executed perfectly, but I thought that was a really interesting way of using that kind of idea.
Yeah, I think it does address a lot of the same kind of ideas as time travel because you get into this idea of like multiple selves and like,
Right.
you know, what happens to your life if a little, you know, a few variables are different or whatever. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that that was at least interesting. I mean, even if a debut isn't perfect, if it's interesting, that to me is always exciting in terms
Yeah.
of future work.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be keeping an eye out for what else she comes out with. She's got an interesting academic background too, which I'm always curious too about authors that have studied like politics or history. Like I tend to find some of their work interesting.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
actually, do you know about the author of Ring Shout, which you mentioned earlier, P. Jelly Clark? So that's his pen name for his fiction, but he's actually a professor who studies like race and history in America.
I did not know that, but I mean, that 100% makes sense given that
Yeah,
book.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
really
that's
interesting.
such a good
It is really good.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the other, like one of the other interesting things to me that I discovered was that the books I liked the most were some of the lowest voted for in the awards, and all of the ones that I gave the lowest rating to, like my bottom 3 were the top 3 in terms of votes.
That's so funny.
um,
It's like Goodreads
so
Choice
yeah.
Awards might not be your best way to pick sci-fi.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, so the one that won in 2019 was Recursion from Blake Crouch.
Oh yeah.
And it is time travel. I definitely felt like it, in my opinion, was one of the ones that was like a little bit more emotionally manipulative version of it. But I think part of why I was picky about it is that I am a big mystery thriller reader. And to
Hmm.
me, it felt like just like not a very good version of a thriller. So I wonder if like you don't read a ton of thrillers, if it would have felt like fresher, maybe.
Oh,
I don't
that's
know.
interesting. Yeah, maybe. I haven't read it because I know it has time travel and I've thought, oh, well, I should, because I should try something by him, but I keep putting it off because I don't really like time travel books.
Yeah, I mean, if you already don't like the trope, it's not the one I would recommend to
Okay,
someone
well,
trying to get into it.
that's good to know. I might not try so hard. I
Yeah.
really enjoy things with a lot of politics and stuff. I don't know if have you read A Memory Called Empire by Archibald
Yes, that
Martin?
was I ranked that, I think, my number 3 in the project because it was nominated.
It's so good. I
Yeah, it was really
loved
good.
it.
I had some issues with the pacing towards the end,
Same, yes.
but yeah, like I really like the writing. Yeah, that hit a lot of my pleasure buttons because it was all about the political machinations, which is something I
Hmm.
love in both sci-fi and fantasy.
Yeah, same. I also thought it was so interesting, the detail with the linguistic world building. I thought it was fascinating, kind of the way
Mm.
she gets into linguistics in that one. I
I
really
love the
enjoyed it.
naming conventions in that book.
Hmm.
Like, there's such wild names because it would be like, I feel like it was like a number and then an object. So you would meet someone named like 17 hair clip or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Like, just have these crazy
It's
names.
really interesting. I'm super excited about I think it's just a duology, and I'm really excited for the next book because I feel like the next one is probably going to explore more things to do with Empire, which this got into a little bit, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm kind of nervous. I don't know if I'll read on because I actually really
mhm.
like the way the book ended.
It is a good
Um,
ending.
which that always it's like a strength and a weakness, I feel like, in a series, because on the one hand books should stand on their own, but
Hmm.
if it doesn't entice me to keep reading because I like the way it ended, I
Hmm.
don't know.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, it'll be interesting. I'm curious to see where it goes, and I enjoyed it, and it's her debut, and so part of it is I'm also curious to see how her second book is.
I didn't realize that was a debut. That's like hella impressive.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that was really, I thought the writing was really really nice.
Hmm. I think she's married to another author. I can't remember who her wife is, but I think it's somebody else who's an author who's fairly well known.
That sounds right. Yeah, I feel like I saw them at the Hugo Awards.
Now I
I
want to
forget.
see if I can find it. Vivian Shaw is her wife.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I recognize the covers of her book, Strange Practice.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Okay, I remember. Yeah.
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 So
No,
it's a
anyway, I
power
just thought.
power couple.
Yeah, well, you know what's interesting? They're not the only ones. You know who else are married that I don't know how many people know about this, but Natalie C. Parker and Tessa Gratton are married as well.
I know Tessa Gratton, or I know of Tessa Gratton, but I don't know that I know of Natalie C. Park.
Natalie C. Parker writes more YA. She wrote the Seafire books, or Seafire, which was
Hmm.
like a YA kind of group of girls on ships fantasy thing, and she's written some other things.
Oh,
So, yeah.
okay. I recognize these covers. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you
Yeah.
go.
So, it's always interesting. I'm always curious about authors' personal lives. So,
It just depends.
yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I don't want to know more because when I find out more, it's like, oh, okay.
Fair.
But sometimes it's
Yeah.
great. Like Courtney Milan has like the best personal life stuff ever. Like,
Yeah.
so it's
So I know we're talking about sci-fi, but I'm so glad because you sent me the first book by her that I ever read,
yes.
and last month I read like 3 of her books. I've been loving her stuff. It's so good.
I mean, I'm also gonna take credit for the fact that I made you read Sight Changeling,
Also
so
true. Yes.
you're welcome.
Yes.
I'm like blessing your life this
Yeah,
fall.
absolutely.
No, I knew Courtney Milan would be your
Yeah.
deal. Like her whole project is very you.
Yes. That's really true.
She's
I'm
very
like, this is
everyone.
so
Courtney
good.
Milan
This
is
is
great.
exactly what I like. It's great.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Yep. That's fun.
I'm looking at my list here of other ones. So the other two ones that I absolutely love from this, have you read Exhalation from
I
Ted
have
Chiang?
not, but it's kind of on my list of things I'm interested in. I've heard good things about it, and then I saw you really loved it. I saw the movie Arrival that I know. I think is it in there that
Mm.
the short story? is, or is that a
It's not in that
different collection?
collection. Yeah, it's a different one, and I definitely want to read that collection now because it was just so
Mhm.
good. I really these days I love short stories, but I'm a lot pickier about them than I used to be. And I do find I quite enjoy kind of like literary genre short story
Hmm.
collections, and this totally scratched that itch. Like it's just the writing. It's not necessarily like super lyrical or
Mhm.
anything, but he's just so clearly like he packs a lot of ideas into his
That's cool.
stories. Yeah, like and there's a huge like range of the kinds of sci-fi in this collection. Like it's got, you know, AI, it's got alternative like parallel universe or alternative timelines, it's got virtual reality. I mean just like dystopia, like pick one and it's there's something in here. So I was super impressed with that. I just absolutely
That's
loved
cool.
it.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about his writing, but I've not read anything by him at this point.
Yeah, he's got ideas. I think you would be
Yeah,
into his kind of
that sounds
project.
interesting.
Yeah, and then the test from Sylvan Nouvelle. That was the other one I
I
really
liked that a
enjoyed.
lot too.
Did you
Yeah,
read that
I've read that
one?
one. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I thought that was a great example of like a high concept novella that just like really executed on its
yeah,
idea pretty
yeah.
effectively.
Yeah, no, I thought it's interesting because I really enjoyed it, and then I was watching the replay of the live show from the BookTube SFF Awards, and it was one of the finalists in the novella category, and most of the judges
Hmm.
had problems with it, and which I thought was interesting. I kind of feel like it hits better with an American audience, was what I gathered from their conversation, basically.
Mm,
Yeah,
interesting.
because one person, for instance, was talking about how because it's in the British immigration system and thought that it was a terrible depiction of how it actually works and was like problematic. And I was like, that's interesting because from what I know about the American immigration system, it really, I felt like was very effective. And the one judge who did like it was also American. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I guess, and I mean, I didn't
Mhm.
hear the conversation, so don't want to
Sure.
fully judge. I guess I find it somewhat an interesting critique to say that it's not like the real system because like that's the point of the
Mhm.
story. Like it's not meant to be like the real system. Like
Yeah.
it's
I
dystopic.
think I think she felt like I'm paraphrasing here, and it's been a while since I've watched it. So, but I want to say she was saying something to the effect of that it was making incorrect assumptions about what the test is even for or what they're looking for, and didn't like. I don't remember. I think there were also some people who felt like it was like slightly racist, which I I don't know. Yeah, it was an interesting conversation. So you maybe if you get a chance to see
Huh.
it and see what you think. But
Yeah,
um
that's
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, I mean, and again, like I'm not from the community against whom there would be
right.
racism
Right.
perpetrated. So, I mean, I definitely can't be the
Yeah,
arbiter of
sure.
that. But that wasn't to me. Again, that was kind of like the point of the story was undermining
Right.
racism. So I'd be interested to
Yeah.
hear um, what the critiques were. I admire, I mean, I really, if you can't tell, just even from this conversation, I brought up several novellas and
Mhm.
short stories. I'm somebody who really values well paced stories that know when to get in and get
Mhm.
out. Like, I feel like the longer your book goes on, the more you need to kind of earn the length.
Mhm.
So I do really enjoy a well done novella because I think, especially in this, like, it's so hard to get people to read anyway. I love being able to give somebody who may not be a big reader a novella and say, like, hey, I think you'll really like this because it's something that's a little more like consume, like easy to consume
Right.
or like easy to work into, your busy life. And I just really admire people who have enough command over their own storytelling that they can tell a fully realized story without it having to go on for 3, 4, 500 pages.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that makes sense. I'm finding I do like sci-fi novellas, but I also think I'm more okay with reading longer things. I don't know. Like, I think I have probably more patience for it than you do sometimes, even if it's
Yeah, that's probably
long.
true. I think especially as I get older, I just I don't know. I read for this project, I read Wanderers from Chuck Wendig, and it reminded me of what it's like to just sort of get lost in a book that probably was too
Mm-hmm.
long. Like objectively, I think it probably should have had 100 or 200 pages trimmed out of it. It was like 800 or 900 pages. So that was a nice reminder to me of like, okay, yeah, like if I'm into a book, I can get kind of just lost in it and not, get super critical about length. But I don't know. I tend to feel like in sci-fi and fantasy there's somewhat a value in the community for long books kind of for the sake of them being
Mm-hmm.
long. And I guess like maybe that's part of why I really like enjoy and champion novellas and short stories in those two subgenres when I find them, because I'm like, see, you don't like you can tell a full story and you don't have to go as long as I think people kind of
Yeah.
assume you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I do think some stories need to be longer, but I also think there's something to be said for, learning how to edit yourself and consolidate your ideas on to some extent. I mean, I like a good book. It's funny, I used to buy books based on how long they were because they would last me longer.
Yeah. I feel like I did that as when I had more limited book
Yeah.
buying funds. It was
Yeah.
like, you got to make bang for buck
Make
here.
it
We got to,
count. Yeah,
yep.
exactly. Yeah, much less so now with how many books I have to read, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I don't know. I mean, I definitely can get, like, I'm thinking, I read the first book in Robin Hobb's Farseer
oh yeah.
trilogy this
Mhm.
year, which is sort of a long, meandering book. And, like, I enjoyed that. Like, I can get swept away in it. I guess I want to like I don't know challenge this sort of prevailing perspective in speculative fiction where it's like, oh, if it's not a doorstopper, it's not detailed enough, or
Right.
it's not whatever enough. It's like, okay, well, sometimes like some authors are able to do this with much fewer pages and
Yeah.
be much more
Yeah.
effective. Cough.
Well,
Well, I was about to call someone out. I'm not going to.
okay.
Okay, I almost called a very popular author onto the table, and I held myself back because I don't want to. I don't want those
Okay.
comments.
Fair. Oh, goodness. One thing, I don't know that these are paced perfectly, but just in terms of ideas, the Binti trilogy by Nedia Coraphor, which are sci-fi novellas.
Yeah.
And those, I mean, I think they're not necessarily perfect, but she packs so much world and so many ideas into so few pages. It's really remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, I I did have problems with those novellas. Agreed definitely on the density of ideas, but I'm actually even more impressed with her Akeda
Hmm.
fantasy series for YA middle grade, because it's the same thing. Like they're not, I mean, they're YA middle grade, they're not that
Yeah.
long, but like the amount of world building and the amount of just like crazy things that happen in those
Hmm.
books, like it's like,
Yeah.
it's very dense. I love her imaginative sort of like landscape is just kind of amazing and
Yes.
astounding. And what would it be like to live in her head?
Seriously, I feel like her books are among some of the most imaginative that I've read, or I feel it's like nothing else I've read,
Yeah,
which is amazing.
e- exactly. And I love authors like that, where it's like, I can't think of somebody else who is exactly like
Yeah.
this author. I love that
Yeah.
feeling.
Okay, so one example of this that I know you were less a fan of, but I feel like falls into that category, is Tamsen Muir, who wrote Gideon the Ninth. I know you DNF'd it and it was like not for you,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
She is distinct. I 100% agree with that.
very distinct. Well, and I think she's doing really interesting things with the craft of the novels, really kind of outside the box. Because I read the second book in the series, Hair of the Ninth, and I ended up landing on 4 stars for it because I was like, basically, the reading experience of the first half to 2/3 of the book is not a pleasant one because it's very disorienting and confusing, and you don't understand what's going on, and it's not pleasant. But
Huh.
if you stick it out, it all eventually makes sense and it's like brilliant, and the choices that she made that didn't make sense earlier in the narrative structure and style are like perfect. And I don't know, I just was like, whoa, this is really amazing and really cool. Not necessarily the most fun thing to read as a reader the first time around, but like so well crafted, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I actually that the feeling of purposeful disorientation from the author to the reader is one of my favorite things to experience in books. Like I
Mhm.
feel like the Light Brigade does that. Library at Mount Char does that. Like where you're
Mhm.
like, I don't totally know what's going on, but I can tell the author does, and they're
Yeah.
giving me enough to go on that I don't feel like I'm just like completely adrift in nothingness, but like I don't
Yeah.
totally know what, like I actually really like that feeling.
Hmm.
So that probably wouldn't
That's
be a
interesting.
problem for me. I, however, really don't like Tamsen Muir's writing style. And that's one of the number one things that makes me DNF a book. Cause like if I'm not
Yeah.
enjoying the voice of the author in my head,
Mhm.
it's very like Catherine and Valente. I want to love her books so much, and I've tried to, and both of them, I just like actively was having the worst time. Like one of the worst
Yeah.
times I've had reading a book, and it's just because I hated the prose so much. Um, so kind of similar to Tamsin Muir, because I like the ideas that were in Gideon the Ninth.
Yeah.
I could not with the writing.
I mean, that's fair. It's very stylized. Like if I were to compare it to a movie, it would be like 300.
Mm, yeah, I could see that.
And which, you know, so she's got like very kind of like over the top stylized brutal sort of writing. And Gideon, I think also what's interesting, so this is the other thing that's interesting, is book two is not from Gideon's perspective.
Mhm.
And so that's the other thing, is it feels very different. So a lot of people don't like Gideon as a character. I love her as a character. I think she's great. I realized how much my love for the first book in the series, when I was reading the second book, was carried by my love of her as a character. And
Yeah, and I
because
wasn't
then
that
I
into
didn't have
her.
her. Yeah, I know. Well, I know. Like a lot of people are not, which is fine. Like, but for whatever reason, like she just strikes a chord with me, and I don't know what it is, but she's like one of my favorite characters.
You
And so,
know, yeah.
yeah, but it's one of those things where I tell people, try a couple chapters. If you don't like Gideon or you don't like the style, you're probably not going to enjoy the book. Probably
Yeah,
not going
and
to enjoy the book.
I tried reading physically and I switched to audio because I was like, oh, maybe I'll like this better. And I was like, nope, hate it. Like,
Yeah.
I like it less when
Yeah.
it's being read
Yep.
out loud. So,
Yeah. Which
yeah,
is fair. I mean, it's probably just not for you, which
yeah.
is totally fine. But yeah, I really, really loved it a lot. And the second book was harder because it's not from her perspective, and it was striking to me how different the tone was, which means that she can write very distinct character voices.
Yeah, that's impressive. Yeah, I don't
So,
know. I always feel I very much subscribe to I don't know if you've heard of the Judge John Hodgman podcast, but it's a good one. But
mm-mm.
one of his sort of edicts on that show is that people like what they like, and you
Mhm.
cannot talk someone into liking something that they don't like.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yep.
I very much believe that of like, hey, like the reason why there's so much, different content and media in this world for people to consume is because there is, an infinite variety of human taste and enjoyment. And some things are for
True.
me and some things are not for me. And that's okay.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Yeah. Okay, so one other book that I really liked this year, and I would love to see more people. I feel like nobody is talking about it. I haven't seen anybody else talk about it. And I think it's really, really good, is Unconquerable Sun by Kate Elliott.
Oh, yeah, that was on my radar when it first came out. But I think because of Operation Sci Fi, I was like, ugh, I just don't
Mhm.
think I can commit to that this year.
So I think you might really enjoy it if you get a chance to try it. And it's such an interesting idea. It's a gender flipped Alexander the Great in space,
Hmm.
is the concept behind it, which is really cool. And it's very fast paced. If anything, I think my main critique of it was sometimes it felt too fast paced, where I wanted more breathing room for the characters. But it's really interesting in terms of politics. It's got a lot of that political intrigue, a lot of complex courtly politics and relationships and different moving pieces. And it's also dealing with ideas of empire, and it's got battles, and it's great. It's got like everything. And I'm like, why is nobody else talking about this book? It's really good.
Well, Kate Elliott is one of those authors I've wanted to try because I feel like she's sort of one of those like underloved pioneers of female speculative romance writers.
Yeah.
So I have a different book from her on my shelf. Ooh, it's called Cold Magic. That's what it's called.
Oh, that's good.
I've heard good things about it, and I want to try her for that. You know, like I don't know. I'm always into the pioneering ladies of different genres, so I want to try her and give her a chance. But I'm glad the premise of that one intrigued me when it was coming out. So maybe someday, I'm sure my library has it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's the kind of sci-fi you would probably enjoy. So. Yeah.
This was not something that was represented in Operation Sci-Fi, but something I have very much solidified for myself this year, probably recently vis-a-vis my love of Ruby Dixon. But I've also realized how much, like, I knew that I really liked fantasy romance, but this year I also feel like I've really like dug into my love of sci-fi romance. Because I feel like a lot of it is very like metaphorically it's dealing a lot with essentially like cross-cultural romance or even sometimes like interracial romance. Like it's a lot of the same kind of conflicts and thematic ideas, and then like also they tend to be just sort of like light and fun and very character driven, obviously, which is something I like in sci-fi in general. But yeah, I think that's something else this year of sort of like, yeah, no, I do like a sci-fi romance quite a bit. Like I like a dystopian romance, but I really love like a like mail order bride alien romance. Like those are just like silly fun, and you know, and Ice Planet Barbarians, there's like some really fun over the top premises. And I'm like, I think I'm book like 15 right now. So
oh my gosh,
binging those.
I read the first one, which I'm glad I like know what it is now. It was
I'm gonna tell you,
I didn't hate it. It was just like
I liked it much more than I thought I would like it because I knew about the like hard things that happen in that book up front. And I thought that would like totally kill my.
Bothered by.
I thought that was going to totally keep me from liking that book at all.
Yeah,
but I actually, especially because then there's like a novella between the first book and the second book where they like really address some of what happens at the beginning of that book.
Interesting.
And it made me feel like it was more kind of like respectful. So anyway,
that's interesting. Yeah, I was less bothered by that. A little jarred. I guess.
It's a lot. There's basically just content warning for people. There's like on page pretty frank descriptions of sexual assault.
Yeah, pretty early on.
Yeah,
but not by the hero. Well,
no.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but the Cooey, Bethany, he doesn't know.
I know.
But like they get like I think the first couple of them are a little like heavier in tone, but they get really like pretty rompy pretty quickly, and they're very bingeable. Like, these like dumb hot blue aliens with their magical genitals, like it's just they're dumb and sweet, and the human women just are like helping them figure out how to make their little ice planet a little more habitable.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But anyway, that's been a fun discovery this year of like really like, you know, diving in more on kind of that intersection between two genres I already like and just enjoying and kind of naming like, yeah, I really do like, you know, a good sci-fi romance.
Right. Well, and I mean, speaking of earlier, we mentioned the Sci-Changeling series. I would call that sci-fi romance. It's grouped in often with paranormal,
but
because
it's not. It's sci-fi romance.
Sci-fi.
Yeah. And so is I would call. Oh, I gave you the first book in this. One of the series from Alona Andrews, the Innkeeper series.
Yeah, that was. It's like a sci-fi fantasy crossover.
Which is I will say that's something else I really love, and like this is something I like in general. I tend to like genre crossovers.
Same.
I really like it when something's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but I love it when a book is ambiguous as to if it is sci-fi or fantasy. I very much enjoy that. And yeah, but I tend to think, especially, I don't know if you've read further in the series, as the series goes
I
on,
haven't yet,
I
but
think of
I
it
want to at
much
some point.
more as sci-fi.
Okay.
But yeah, like that's another, to me, that's like a sci-fi romance little series that I absolutely love.
Yeah, that's really fun. Have you read yet the 5th season?
No, no, not yet.
Because that's a really interesting series that is very ambiguous as to whether it's sci-fi or fantasy.
Yeah, it's one that I'm definitely going to get to at some point. I think
Mhm.
because I'm fairly certain I figured out the quote unquote twist in the first book based on what people have
Mhm.
said about it. I think it's
Mhm.
like kept me from going there because
But
not
I
that
mean,
it's been spoiled, but
even
just like
if you know the twist, like there is so much more to that book. Like
I
it's a
yeah,
rereadable book, like it's like that's,
it's like
you know,
layered. Well, and I'm much more of a
it's
how than a what reader, but I think because I figured that out, I was like, okay, I want to like give like kind of give it some space and I'll come back to it. So
Mhm.
I plan
Mhm.
on reading it at some point.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed The City We Became this year from N.K. Jemisin. That was good.
That is on my list of things I want to read by the end of the year. So,
You
yeah.
will, I think you will love that book. It is
Yeah, I
very
feel like I
idea
probably will.
forward in a way that I think
Mhm.
you will very much enjoy.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think whenever you do get to it, you're probably going to love the Broken Earth trilogy. It's just, oh my gosh. I mean, it is brilliant. There's a reason all three of them won Hugo Awards.
That's the thing.
You
Like,
know?
I'm not sure I've really encountered anyone who hasn't loved them. I'm sure that they're
Mhm.
out there, but it seems like that's one of those books that just like almost everybody loves.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen some people, the people who seem not to like it feel like it's too dense and complicated. I don't think it is actually that, but I think sometimes those people are people who are not used to reading a lot of more intense adult sci-fi or fantasy in the first place.
Hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't think of, based on what I know of it, and reading some of her other work, I would not guess that's like a good transition for people who are trying to go
No,
from YA to adult.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
probably that would not be my recommendation, but it is really good and really brilliant. And if you're used to the genres, it's super readable. And I'm just, I could do like a whole gush about this
I
trilogy.
mean,
It's
your
so
podcast,
smart.
you can go for it. You heard me
It's
gushing
true.
so
It's
much
true.
about her.
I could. That's true. Well, I mean, because her character development and her world building, and then the themes that she layers in, there's just so much going on that she's talking about.
Hmm.
It, and the plot is also really interesting. And I did not see coming the direction it took later on in the series. And book one has its own sort of themes, but later books are really interesting too, because one of the things they're exploring is the complexities of parent-child relationships,
Hmm.
which is there's just so much. And then there's stuff dealing with systemic racism and oppression, stuff about privilege, stuff about how we think about family and relationships, and there's a lot layered in with the characters, but then there's the larger world piece of it, and then there's all these other things that I can't talk about because they'd be super spoilery that you find out later. So it's just it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I know I'm gonna love it. I so I don't know. Well, actually, I do know that you probably relate to this just based on the fact that you also read as much as you as I do.
Yeah.
Um, recently I've been feeling the weight of how many series I have going that I haven't
Yeah.
either caught up with or finished. And I do think
Mm.
that one of my goals probably for 2021 is to stop starting as many series and to
Mm.
try to catch up with some of them.
Mhm.
Because I have so many like sequels on my TBR shelf and I look at them and I'm like, I know I'm really gonna like you, but there's this shiny new series right over here and whatever. And
Yeah.
like, I don't know, it's hard because we both read a lot of front lists like to kind of find the right
Mhm.
balance. But that's
Yeah.
part of my thinking too is like, oh, do I really want to commit to like a very, like a series that I know I'm really gonna love right now. Like I kind of want
Right.
to like finish some series or catch up. I don't know. That's probably me
Yeah.
just
No, I get that.
overthinking, but
I mean, I get it. I think my experience with it, which was interesting, is I read the first book and I was like, well, I now need to immediately keep reading. So, I mean, I binged the whole series in less than 2 months. So, like, it
Oh my
just.
gosh. Well, see, and like, yeah, that's what I'm doing right now with Ice Planets. I
Hmm.
couldn't do that with In Death just because of how many there are, but
Hmm.
I did read those pretty quickly. Side Changeling I read in 6 weeks, not even. I read that in
Oh,
like a
wow.
month.
Oh my
Where are
gosh.
you in Side Changeling?
I just finished book 10, which was great.
It's such a good
It was
one. And
such
Bethany,
a good
when I tell you that the 12th book is
one.
everything, like if you think book 10 is good, like strap yourself in. Like the
I am
11th book
looking
is
forward
one of my least favorite in the series. It's okay, but the 12th
to
book,
it.
12, 13, and 14 are all great, but 12 is just like chef's
That's
kiss.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, 10 is definitely I actually recently ordered copies of my favorites so far in the series in the trade paperback covers because I like those covers better.
Yeah. The covers get good at the 12th book. Like they started
Hmm.
getting more what I would call like neutral covers because they realized
Hmm.
like, oh, maybe non-romance readers would like these, and like lo and behold,
Hmm.
yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, but so I ordered those. It's funny to me. I like them even when I don't love the
That's
romance.
the
I just keep
thing,
reading.
because it's like it's your pals,
Hmm.
like just
Yeah.
hanging out with the different clans and tribes, and yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
bad side changeling book is still like a better time than I have in many things I read.
Yeah. No, it's great. So I think so I've read 10 so far and I'm buying 4 of them.
Yeah,
So,
pretty good hit
yeah.
rate. I
Yeah.
let me guess. Okay, Caressed by Ice, obviously.
Mhm. Definitely.
Kiss of Snow, obviously.
Uh-huh.
I think you liked some of the kind of like I think you liked 7 and 8 better than I did.
I need to find okay, because
Did
now I'm
did
not
you
gonna
get the
remember.
one with Mercedes?
Okay, so I got book 1. So I actually really liked Slave to Sensation. I liked
I
them.
yeah, I think I like it better in retrospect. I for some reason I feel nervous. Like you have to start at the beginning of Side Changeling.
Yeah.
Like you can't really read that series out of order. But I always feel nervous telling
Mhm.
people that because for whatever reason in my mind I have it that the first one is not that good. But I think it's just because
Mhm.
I know how good it gets later on.
Yeah.
But the first one is good.
No,
Like there's a reason the series took off. The first one's good.
yeah. I think the thing is too is I also just really loved those characters. So even though the first
Yeah.
one wasn't perfect, I really liked them and I loved what their relationship turned into in later books too. So
Yeah,
I don't
and you
know.
get to spend a
I
lot of
just
time with that couple
you
for the
do.
rest of the series, which is nice.
Yeah. So the other one that I bought was Branded by Fire, which is Mercy
Mercedes, yes, I
and
was gonna because that's a really yeah, that one's really good.
mhm. Yeah, I liked that. So
And okay,
yeah.
okay, those are good picks. Book 12, book 12 is like one of my top favorite books ever of all time. Like even not just in a series, it's just I don't. Well, now I feel like I'm overhyping it, but I didn't overhype. Like I didn't overhype Caressed by Ice, right? Like I
Yeah.
mean, you like I
No,
think you
Caressed by Ice is I mean, it's on my favorites of the year list. It's great.
oh, it's oh my
Yeah.
gosh, Judd.
I love it.
Still my beating heart. Okay, well anyway, sorry. I didn't mean to make
Mhm.
this the side changeling cast, but
No, this is great. That's fine. I think what I really loved about well, I mean, I liked everything about Caressed by Us, but I think the thing for me that pushed it over the top into favorite status for the year was the way that it handled a intimate relationship after having experienced trauma.
yeah, for sure.
I just felt like that was so well handled, and that for me was sort of the extra, like the thing that nudged it up to favorite status.
Well, and I feel like it handles that from both parties because really
Yeah.
both of them have experienced like a profound violation of their own autonomy.
Yep.
Um, so, yeah, the
Yep.
power dynamics in the entire Side Changeling series is just fantastic. Like, yeah, this is part of why I like sci-fi romance. Because Side Changeling, I agree, is a sci-fi romance series, but same for fantasy.
Hmm.
Because there's some sort of speculative element, for me, there's more room to explore like more quote unquote problematic power dynamics, because usually the women involved in relationships have some sort of power of their own, or they're living in a
Yeah.
futuristic society where there's a lot more gender parity.
Right.
So like there are like some over the top, I mean, like you just read Kiss of Snow, like homeboy is like a super over the top alpha, but like she can literally destroy him. Like,
Yeah.
you know, she can get as good as she gets. So for me, it opens up space to have like these interesting explorations of tropes of like power dynamics that I would not be comfortable with. Probably not in a contemporary, but certainly not in a historical.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, I mean, alpha male is never my favorite thing, but I am much more okay with it in this kind of speculative series if the heroine is not kind of a pushover.
Yeah, well, and I can deal with the heroine being a pushover if it's protective alpha in these kind of books, which I think I probably have a higher tolerance for that than you do.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, but in general, yeah, I would agree. Like part of what I like is okay, yeah, like he's kind of an alpha hole, but like she's also like not taking any guff, so
No.
it's not a problem.
Well, and also I think particularly book 10, that relationship had just been such a long time coming.
Oh my gosh, right?
So, yeah.
And then like and I feel like the payoff at the end of that book with like how the political part of it comes together and then like how her power gets resolved, because you know, like, well, and this is what Nalini Singh does so well. She sets these situations up and you're like, it's impossible, like how are they gonna survive? And then like she
magically
every time she figures out a way to like sell me on it, and I'm like, that's how they survived, and I loved it.
Yep, it's great.
Lauren, I'm just like, yes. Or no, wait, what's her name? Sienna? Is that her name?
Yeah, Sienna.
Yeah, Sienna. I'm just like, ugh, like it was everything I wanted. And more.
It was good. Yeah, I really liked it a lot. It was great. Okay, well, I think we are about at time for this episode. Well, this has been fun, so thank you so much, Mara. And Mara and I are going to stay after. She records some special bonus content for patrons. So again, you can check that out in the show notes if you guys want to get in on that. We've had some really exciting juicy bonus content from all of our previous guests. Again, this has been Chapter 3 Podcast, and I'm your host, Bethany. You can follow us on Twitter at Chapter 3 Podcast, and you can also find me on YouTube at Beautifully Bookish Bethany if you want even more book content from me. The next episode will be available in 2 weeks, and this episode's bonus content will be available to patrons in the next couple of days. Thanks for listening.